Hold on, y'all. Let me take these off because this is a special broadcast. This is a little more serious. I want to say hi first to my rhythmic brothers and sisters, my rhythmic warriors. And that's kind of like what this is all about. This is a show that I need to do, and I don't even call it a show. I call it talking to the people out there that want to hear and want to listen. This is about rhythmic warriors and rhythmic brothers and sisters out there. And which one are you? You know, are you a real rhythmic warrior? Or are you a person that just uses social party dances and street dances and cultural dances to your ends and means? You know, it's been a crazy weekend on the internet. And I'm a person, OG Skeeter Rabbit's a person that, yeah, I pay attention to the internet. I pay attention to the broadcast. I pay attention to the locking world, because a person that interacts in the locking world without understanding what's going on and what has taken place in the locking world, to me, is an idiot. And I'm just going to call it the way that I see it. This is a show that I'm going to keep real. You know, I got a brother that is over, I believe, in Nigeria, and I call him a brother because he's a true rhythmic warrior. Although he's obtained a lot of acclaim and fame in the entertainment industry, he's an old Soul Train dancer that became famous as one of the members of Shalimar, and that's a brother, Jeffrey Daniels. Jeffrey Daniels says sometimes you got to take the gloves off, and you got to get down. You got to step on some toes. You got to keep it real and telling the true stories, because that's what street dance was about. It was about, if we couldn't tell our stories on main media, we told them in the streets, and we told them with dance, and we told them with music. But see, y'all don't realize that. Many of y'all don't realize that. To y'all, it's just a dance. Like my brother Peekaboo Frankie says, it's just a dance. So you use it however you can, and then you throw it away like toilet paper, like we're toilet paper as people. You know, some of the things that I read and I saw in this week's internet scene was alarming. But I can't lie to you. It's been alarming to me for about 50 years when I first saw the first wave of exploitation, the first wave of misappropriation of culture, the first wave of dividing black people against other black people, the first wave of making the brown people think that they were not part of black people, and all of that. See, like I said, the gloves are off. I'm keeping it real. It's going to be real. We're going to talk about it real. And you know what? There may be some names that come out in this particular broadcast, and maybe from the broadcast from now on. Because when you try to hide and soften things, sometimes people take those things as you being soft. They take it as you acquiescing to the things that are wrong out there. They take you to agreeing with them. They use other people to dispute what you say because they think you're too soft to come back and tell it the way that it really is. Well, a real OG looks you straight in the eye and tell you exactly the way it is. A real OG is not afraid to speak what's truth to power. A real OG is not afraid to tell you what the social issues is that affected his dance. The players, the gamers. Oh, it's all about what they did on TV. It's all about how they let this promoter exploit them and use them and deal with them. It's all about that. But this was born from activism. This was born from people willing to stand up against what the norm was. That's what this was born from. And if OGs, if you're scared to tell your students that, you never was from this community. You never were. And I've seen it a lot. But see, now I'm tired of it. I'm a 66-year-old dancer who walked the streets when he was 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. That seen the first time that a major tour was done by a dance crew. And now I've tried to bring my pioneer brothers and sisters together. People claim they do that now. I'm trying to bring this together. I tried a long time ago. I tried back in the 1970s. I tried recently in the last 20 years of the recent era. But you know what? I'm not going to do it at the expense of lying to the younger generation about what's really taking place. You know, this week when I opened up my internet, I read something, and I know it steps on toes. But I'm so glad there's rhythmic warriors out there that's not afraid to step on toes. It was posted by another rhythmic warrior, real rhythmic warrior, Buddha Stretch out of New York. And I think he posted a post written by a brother named Scheme Richards. The brother laid it out there on the line exactly the way it should be told. I'm going to read it to you. It says, during the time of craziness in America with BLM, that's Black Lives Matter, y'all, a lot of Europeans and rest of the world, B-boys and hip-hop, was quiet, even though they enjoy our culture. Yeah, they were silent. When all that was going on, when all the activism was going on, they were silent. The people that we went to across the waters and that we had taught and that we thought we'd instilled in them the power and the fire to be dance advocates, they were quiet. They were silent. Now I'm hearing there's craziness going on in the UK with black people as well. Why did y'all think y'all was immune? Why did you think you was ever attracted to street dance? You were black people from a black culture, but you were only interested a lot of times in the economic value of what we were offering you. And we were trying to tell you that we have lived through these things from the 1960s, even earlier, through the 1970s, through the 1980s, to bring you that the streets of New York were flooded with people that were dealing with social issues. The advocacy of the West Coast was deep from some of the same reasons that existed with the Black Floyd, with the Black Lives Matter protests dealing with George Floyd murder. I'm going to continue. Are y'all still silent, even though it's your own soil, while still enjoying our culture? Or are you out and taking a stance? Not really seeing some of you who are vocal about everything else dealing with the culture being vocal in this. Thank you, Brother Skeen. Now, it may be stepping on some toes. We may have stepped on a lot of toes, but that's the truth. That's the absolute truth. I never seen so many people run. I've seen people tell me, I don't want to get involved in politics. Locking was born from politics. It wasn't born from just a dancer doing a mistake. It was born from the politics of the 1960s. Soul Train was born from politics. With Don Cornelius being an ex-police officer and then a social advocate in the streets with Dr. Martin Luther King marching, then daring to get on television and raise his fist with a 14-inch afro, was activism. But see, y'all think y'all could do the moves without activism. There is no funk or soul in that. It don't exist. It don't exist when you just want to do the moves. That's not what it's about. It's about true activism. See, we come out of that. My brothers and sisters on the East Coast come out of that. My brothers and sisters in the South of this country come out of that. They come out of that struggle. So you want to talk about misappropriation and those types of things and why we think that the dance is misappropriated on the streets and all of those things. You're worried about those things, right? But when it comes time to stand up for the cause, many of you ain't there. And let me clarify something. I'm going to lean in for it. So let me clarify something. I'm not talking about just your international scene. They were taught a lot of times wrong. As in regular politics, it says both international and domestic. So many of my domestic brothers and sisters that claim OG status, they claim to have come out where I came out. They jump behind the wall and they shudder. Please, Mr. Skeeter Rabbit, Don't talk about that black culture stuff no more. Please, Mr. Skeeter Rabbit. Oh, you're the real Skeeter Rabbit. You're the original Skeeter Rabbit. Please, Mr. Skeeter Rabbit, don't talk about that no more because you're going to ruin our dollars. You're going to ruin our money. Yeah, OGs saw the same thing. Name me one that got on here. Name me one that comes on Locker Legends and backs it up. I have some real old school OGs. My boy Jimmy Henderson, Buddy Go-Go, uh, uh, Guy Evans, rest in peace when he was alive. Steve Crane, Greg Dandridge, Freddie Maxey. Those are real old schoolers. Those aren't your famous ones. Your famous ones run and hide. You know why? Because Locker Legends brought them back onto the scene, and Locker Legends introduced them thinking that they were powerful enough to make a difference in telling you what their culture was about and what the real dance was about. But you know what? They ran and hid when it came time to stand up for Black Lives Matter, when it came time to do what we did in the 1960s and the 1970s, when it came time to raise our fists again and to realize that we opened the door. You know what they did? They ran and they hid. And they start talking about each other. And they talked about Locker Legends. They talked about what they didn't understand with Locker Legends. You know why? Because most of them don't read. Most of them don't understand. Most of them are not educators. There are people that made their life in pursuit of becoming famous in dance. I didn't do that. So some of you ask me, why do I have a right to talk about activism? What have I done in activism? Let me tell you what I did in activism. I'm going to tell you something. See, I don't like the I, me thing. I usually talk about everyone else. And that's why they're back on the scene. It's because I talked about everybody else. Well, let me tell you, when I came back to the U.S. or back to California at the end of the 1970s, I opened 4 businesses. I hired from the black community, opened the businesses in the black community. I hired 3 blocks from Vernon and Central, with a Dunbar Hotel, where all of the major black thoroughfare in Los Angeles, Dolphins of Hollywood, Bojangles. I opened it in my neighborhood, 2 blocks from where I was born and raised. I hired, I taught, I sold black products. I bought from black manufacturers. And then I became president of Vernon Central Merchants Association and established an advocacy. I established TAG, Teams Against Gangs. And we did graffiti paint-offs and that sort of things, gang graffiti paint-offs. I walk the walk that I talk. I don't just talk it. And you know, during that time, I didn't see none of the famous dancers back in the hood of South Central Los Angeles. The name of the store on Central and 46th Street was Skeet's Hair Needs Hair, spelled H-A-R-E, as in Skeeter Rabbit. I saw none of them. And I'd been there for years, down the street from where I was born and raised. They didn't come back into the community, yet they talk about me not being in their community. They had left. They had went and trained people in other cultures and other backgrounds, just like we talk about is happening internationally now. But did I begrudge them? No. I tried to expose them back into the field, hoping that the second time around, we would understand what we did wrong the first time. But we didn't. We didn't. Now, you want to know why we talk about misappropriation? Let's go through some things. Why are there complaints about cultural misappropriation? Oh, it's finna get crazy now, y'all. It's finna get crazy. Let me tell you. Like I said, there's some real rhythmic warriors out there. This week it was brought to my attention about an organization called the Society of Dance Academy in England. Now, I had ran across a couple of things done before, and I've ran across these things over the decades that I've had Locker Legends website put together. And that's been 2 decades now, since the early 2000s. But I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you what people will steal and will do and will take. And sometimes it's the same people that won't stand up for the cultural mission that's taking place, the purpose, the movement. And I don't mean dance moves, your knuckleheads that change all the terminology. I mean the social movement of the streets. Let me show you something. Let me show you something that's really remarkable. The Dance Society of Dance Academy out of England. Now, do you really want to know why this is so significant? Take a look. Take a look. You see, evolution of social dances. Okay, they're teaching social dances. We have a strong black community in England, and I understand the social dances are part of it, and they understand the social dances are part of it. Great. History of Vogue. Okay, that's another concept out of New York. I don't know how accurate that is, but they included that in their website. Now, let me go back and explain something to you. This website is publicly funded. They receive money to do this education. The pioneers, they've established who the pioneers of this social movement is. History of popping. I have my own take on how on a source or side that evolved that helped to evolve popping, and I understand that popping comes from three different directions, and there's always been controversy over trying to make one different direction. That's for a lot of people, but I will say this when it comes to popping: robotics in locking has always existed from day one because of Charles Washington Robot, the original Charles Robot, not Charles Washington, the 1980 Soul Train dancer. And I always clarify these things. The original Charles Washington and Don Campbell coming on in the same era, both on the very first West Coast show of Soul Train. And that's why you see a robot in all of the Lockers events and most of the early locking groups events. I was a robot that toured with the Lockers on the Frank Sinatra tour. Wasn't Slim the Robot, I was. So I believe I do have some say in the robotics that existed within locking. Now let's go. There's the history of whacking. Talk to my gay brothers and sisters from the gay community that instituted whacking and brought it into locking, that actually migrated from the East Coast to the West Coast, but was exposed on Soul Train. Talk to them about that, but it's cultural also, just as popping is cultural streets also. History of house. History of hip hop freestyle. Okay, I let my brothers and sisters, Fable, Stretch, Link, all those people, they address this. They address it every day when they talk about the misappropriation of culture, the misappropriation of their dance styles. But we're all related. We all deal with it from the U.S. We're all related in the history of hip hop when it comes to those things, because locking was embraced by hip hop because it was for the same purpose, street purpose of activism, to explain to the world through dance what the social issues were that we were dealing with. Now, I'm going to get down to some other things. There is a history of locking right there. Let me enter that for you. History of locking. Does any of this stuff look familiar to you? This is all plagiarized directly from Locker Legends' website. Directly. They've never asked my permission. They took my work. They took Locker Legends' work. They took the work from the community that we put out there. They never gave credit for it, and they received public dollars for it. I don't receive those dollars. Locker Legends don't receive those dollars. The black community here in the U.S. don't receive those dollars. They plagiarized it. This is a photograph of Morris Cisco Kid Bailey. It's on the Locker Legends website. That is from his obituary. I received permission to put this on there. They took it. This is a photograph from Edwin Buddy Go-Go Lombard's business profile that I received permission from him to put on Locker Legends. They took it. That's me. These are direct thieves. That's Tito Collins. They assume who's original OG Lockers in their history. in their rendition of the history. They say that that's who that is in their rendition of the history. These are the OGs of lockers in their history. Well, let me tell you, there's many more OGs that come before some of the people out there. Did they talk to anybody that was an authority on this that could give them the real original connotation of what an OG and locking is? Or did they just assume and take these things from a website and start to create their own history? Start to tell people what their history is. Did they assume? A lot of these people are worthy of recognition. Matter of fact, all these people are worthy of recognition. Some of them they wouldn't know, like Arnetta. They wouldn't even know Arnetta if it wasn't for the dance history of locker legends. I dealt with so much flack about Alpha Anderson being a locker and not a locker. But here, because of what Locker Legends work did, they acknowledge him. What's funny is that's Freddie Maxson. They don't even probably know that's me. That's me next to him. Because they never ask, but they get paid for this. You see all of these people? These are the sponsors that pay them for what they think is their work. But it's not their work. This is not their work at all. It's the work that came from here, from the U.S. So you want to know why we talk about appropriation of the dance? Because there's people out there that will misappropriate anything. They will steal and take from anything. They will use anything. Much of this that's talked about is word for word plagiarism. Word for word, they copied those things. You see, let me go to some other things that some things that we talk about. That's the exact bio as it's written on Locker Legends that's posted in their website. Exact bio. My picture, exact bio. Let's keep it real, people. Let's keep it real. You want to know why we talk about misappropriation? Because it's been done for years. Now let's look. Penalties of plagiarism. This is plagiarism. It's the direct theft. Remarkable. But yet you claim you're trying to keep it real? You claim you're about the real? You claim that the people from the U.S. are just overstating things? Now, this is just one instance. I've had several instances of it. I've had some innocent situations that have been misused. And I'm going to tell it like it is. I got a good friend now. He's now a good friend because we've sat down and we've talked about a lot of things that existed. The way that I first met Storm was I was, again, going through the pinging of the internet, and I found a front page to a website that he had put together that was word for word from Locker Legends. And I emailed Storm, good brother. I've since met him. We talked, and he was unaware of what was going on. And he said to me, he says, Skeet, he says, what are you talking about? I says, that page that you got there, go to lockerlegends.net and read the homepage. He did, and he hit me back. He said, oh my God, it's the exact same. I said, well, where did you get that from? He said, well, Skeet, when Greg Pope, God rest his soul, another brother I love, when he was out here, he handed this to me and told me that he had wrote this. This is why the OGs did not get along, because they bought into doing each other. And we do it today. We steal from each other today. We lie today. We tell only the stories that we want to tell today because we're afraid, and we do not believe that the younger generation is mature enough to understand the truth and the power of what locking was when it was real, when we did teach it real. That's the problem. That's the problem. Now, I'm going to move on from this. But like I said, it's many, many, many situations. And I'm going to go into the last area that I really need to go into. This may wind up a little quicker. Told my wife it was going to be about an hour because I needed to say this. I'm going to step out of town for a few days to visit my daughter, but I really needed to say this before I stepped out of town because it's disconcerting to a lot of people. And I have a lot of brothers and sisters, international and domestic, that kept it real. And I'm going to go through some of that with you real quick when we start talking about stories that's never told. See, people think that to tell a lie, you have to actually conjure up a lie and speak the lie and tell the lie. But there's a lot of untruths and lies told because people never told you the real story. How many of you never knew about Watts Writers Workshop before we started talking? How many of you never made the reference with the Watt Stacks until we start making the reference to it? How many of you never thought about social party dances being a root? You only thought that Don Campbell created the root on his own before we started bringing those things back around. See, stories that are untold become lies. And there's so many stories in the history to get us to this point throughout the 2000s that are not being told accurately. And that perpetrates the lie that puts black people against black people, that put OGs against OGs, that put countries against countries. And it creates the division that all of society is looking to have right now anyway. Let me go into some of those things. And like I said, I'm going to call names. I'm going to call it the way that it is. You know, the streaming has become quite popular. And in locking, there's a couple of streams that exist. One of them is my brother Alpha Anderson. He puts it out there. And I believe the system has used Alpha tremendously because he was so excited to get back into what would look like an industry to him, that he was willing to listen to anybody and deal with anything that was taking place. Now, I know I may be stepping on some toes, but I'm going to tell you the truth. And anybody out there that disagrees with my opinion, that's fine. But if you can't back up some of the things that I talk about with facts that did exist in these stories, then don't come at me. Don't come at me because I talk about things that have existed, that are facts, that I were there, and often you were there. So let's talk about it. I'm not going to go through all the stories. I'm going to go through one of the stories in a little more detail, not totally detailed. But see, Aga knows. Aga from Taiwan. He knows the work that was put in to get Alpha to travel when the world would not accept Alpha as a dancer. He knows. He knows he called me twice. And he asked me to do a workshop. None of the other OGs that were out there would recommend Alpha. None of them. But I did. Now watch the videos and ask yourself, do they understand that Locker Legends played an important role for the last 2 decades in bringing them back onto the scene? Or is it all about just the fame, the money, and the events? Alpha's allowed a platform for people to tell him and the world their story. And I listen to all of them story, but they always seem to admit something. I'm going to go over the story of the Hip Hop International in just a second, but let's go through some other things. You see, Gemini Lacciano knows the story of his phone call to me when he asked me about why is he not recognized in France like some of the OGs. He knows we talked about the street culture of gangs and what when you profess for life means. He knows that. He knows that we talked about not trying to sell your image like so many of the famous lockers, but selling a message to a movement. He knows we talked about symbols and how symbols represent your organization. And he knows the time frame. Scramblot knows the meeting in France that took place when I proposed an international organization before any of these organizations that you see jumping up now. He knows I profess that. A-Train from Sweden was there. Scramble Lock was there. But they won't speak of it because it's the absence of truth and story that changes history. I've seen it from day one in the 1970s. Just like you never knew I was on tour with the Lockers, I see it now. I have another good friend that knows the story. But I understand people say, well, I want to stay out of the politics. But sometimes it's too late. You got to tell it like it is. You see, when that symbol of Locking for Life first started circulating around the world, the symbol with the crest, the European crest of knights and conquering, made it to the land of Brazil. And that hurt some of the pioneers of Brazil. Some of the brothers and sisters that got down in Brazil to build the culture. So I got a call. Got a call from a good friend of mine, real brother that really tries to keep it real, Frank Ajara. Frank says, Skeet, he says, why is he coming to my country planting his flag when there are people here that establish the culture of locking here, when there are real OGs here? I says, I'll talk to him, Frank. I'll let him know. Frank says, well, he says that you okay it. I said, no. I called Gemini, and Gemini says, Skeet, tell him that you support us and you back him up. I said, no, I don't back it up. I told you something before. You tell them about the conversation with you and I'll tell him about that conversation. But I also told you that there was a way to make yourself popular. I didn't tell you to establish a business and do it that way. You think Gemini tells that story? No, he tells the story that it was established in 1989 at a time that he didn't even speak English. You see, yes, I'm stepping on toes. I'm telling it the way that it is. You know why? Because I got nothing to lose and there's nothing nobody can do to me. I've been through it all. You can call me angry, you can call me whatever you like. But maybe next week when I go on, not maybe, I'll continue to educate with the love and all the humbleness. Right now, it's time to lay it on the line. It's time to tell it exactly like it is. My good buddy, Jimmy Scooby-Doo, he knows how he found this new world. He knows it. He knows the phone call that him and I had. He knows when I rode to Las Vegas and I sat with him and we talked and he was in awe about this new world. He knows it. Frank Sundance knows that he told me when I told him, hey, I've just started talking to Jimmy Scooby-Doo Foster. Let me sit down and go over with him everything that has taken place. What Greg has done, God bless Greg's soul. What Greg has done to set these things up. Let me sit down and talk with him. You know what Frank told me? He says, Skeeter, I know which side of my bread is buttered on. He says, I won't do that. Just like the rest of the domestic appropriators of the dance. It wasn't a week later before he told me, I'm going to help Scooby-Doo. You know why? Because I was trying to bring the locking world together and they wanted me to take a stance one way or the other. Just like they wanted me to take a stance against Greg and Don. And I tried to bring them together. Wound up on the outside dealing with that. There are other stories. There are stories about the locking camp in Las Vegas. There's some of you out there in Sweden, Supreme. You know about the argument at the HHI. You know about how there was supposed to be a Locking Legends boot camp. My brothers and sisters in Sweden know that because I went to Sweden right after that with Greg. Truth is truth. And there are more stories to the truth. There are more understandings to the truth. There's the elimination of this truth that's been the lie in the history of locking for a long time. A wonderful, wonderful dance that came out the era of the civil rights era that was proudly raising his fist, proudly doing the gestures, that was part of the dance that was influenced by Watt Stacks, who was part of Watts Writers Workshop, that was part of the Watts movement of locking. There are people that want to divide. What Don Campbell did as a 22-year-old was different than what was going on in the streets of the movement. Now, again, Lock of Legends website has been up for 20 years. And although people have talked behind my back, they've talked behind Lock of Legends' back, most of the time it comes out that they never went to the website and they never had the nerve to talk to me straight up in person. I will give credit. One person did. One person, Tony Basil, once confronted me with, why do I teach the way that locking is rolled? She didn't ask me why. She told me I can't teach it that way, which was an insult to my culture because I grew up watching young brothers and sisters do this. You watch them in Stack do this. I grew up watching them rolling the dice next to the ear. So her telling me what my influence was out of line for her culture, for a person that called locking a rock dance. You see, people are afraid to confront the real issues. That's what's wrong with America today. You got a whole political party scared to confront the real issues. Somebody has to do it. If Don Cornelius hadn't did it with Soul Train, it wouldn't be done. We wouldn't be here today. If he didn't take that risk, it wouldn't be done. We wouldn't be here today. So I just wanted to let people know, and there's more to it. Last thing, we talked about the Hip Hop International, the story of the Hip Hop International. Well, I just heard that, we just came up with the idea to do a whole locking thing in the Hip Hop International. It was a heck of an idea that we established and that we were going to do, and the criteria for, and believe me, I love Tasha. I've never had an argument with Natasha in my life. I first ran across her when she sent me an email about coming to Lock of Legends boot camp. And then when she went to Las Vegas, I talked to her when she first got there. We were supposed to meet. She met Sundance, and all of a sudden, when the stuff starts flowing, it changes. And you want to know, and I'm gonna tell everybody. I'm gonna tell everybody how it switched over. But let me explain something to you about the Hip Hop International. In 2005, the first one was in Manhattan Beach. Before it took place, and it was to take place in August. It took place in August. And around May, I was given a call by Tony Gogo, my brother Tony Gogo. And Tony Gogo asked me, he says, Skeet, he says, you need to contact this guy by the name of Howard Schwartz. He's the guy that does the Aerobics International and the Cheerleading International on ESPN. He just left an event out here in Japan, and he's talking about doing a locking event in Los Angeles. You need to contact him. So I went to the old search, and I found Howard Schwartz. And I emailed him and told him that I was told that he's going to do an event out here. What is he going to do? And he says it's going to be much like the Aerobics International and Cheerleading. It's going to be group events where they do choreography. And I asked him about the real street dance, the real cultural street dance of dances like locking and popping, and told him that Greg and I and Tony Gogo was intending to do a Lock of Legends boot camp. And that set off the talk for us collaborating and doing the boot camp within Hip Hop International, because they had no intention of doing a funk and soul there. Let me bring something up and show it to you, since people want to act like I got every email that existed from 2024 on. Every email from Greg and everything. So all of it's documented. I back everything up with facts. With facts. Maybe I learned that from somewhere. What do you think? Let me see. Let me bring that up on a full page. Hope you can still hear me. Look at the date here, you guys. May 5th, 2005. Hip Hop World, AOL, to Lock of Legends. Dear Skeeter, I attempt to reach you by phone prior to leaving to Tokyo, but was unsuccessful. Hip Hop International is interested in your proposal to host a Lock of Legends boot camp during our USA and World Hip Hop Championships, August 18th in Manhattan Beach. Like you, We believe the two events are synergistic and will provide attendees with more program and events to enhance our overall experience. Hip Hop International is prepared to provide locker legends the following: provide a minimum 500 square feet. It gives dates that we were to do a workshop. It was going to provide all audio equipment, included in Locker Legends Boot Camp and Hip Hop's printed promotional materials. That means promote Hip Hop International. Offer Locker Legends Boot Camp attendees international a specifically reduced rates at its 5 participating hotels. Hip Hop International does not assume any liabilities straight. Locker Legends will provide Hip Hop International the following: included, presented at USA World Championships on the Locker Legends Bootcamp promotional material, provide 90 minutes complimentary workshop by Locker Legends to HHI during the Hip Hop Championship weekend. That was to clarify a criteria for judging so that the judges there understood what they were judging with locking, okay? Included in the tickets of boot camp. Now, also, and I have the contract. The contract was for me to provide Don Campbell, Boogaloo Sam, and myself to be presented the Hip Hop or the Locker Legends Lifetime Awards. Now, I don't know what Howard went back and told Tosh. I don't know. I don't know whether she was confused in there as to when she was brought into it, but I got a call from him not too long after that in which he verified that he had talked to Tosh and that Locker Legends website was legitimate and I was a legitimate dancer and it was great to deal with me. That's before he sent me the contract. So therefore, he went back and he talked to Tosh about what we had talked about. Now, Supreme in Sweden can verify this. The reason that we didn't control it is because I never got a call back from Don. And second of all, I wound up with prostate cancer. So I told him that I would like to bring Greg to do the workshop. We talked about it and we decided no, that if we brought Greg, Don Campbell might not accept the award because him and Greg were at odds at that particular time. Yeah, the system had put them at each other just like it usually does. My concept was that we were going to be able to get Greg and Don back together. We were going to be able to make them have amends. Then Howard called me back. He says, don't worry, Skeeter, we got it covered. We have Don coming. You come on anyway, and we will take the situation from there. Well, I did. I bought a few other OGs. I bought Anastorians. I bought Elroy Skiffer there. Tito Collins came to see us do the presentation and the whole bit. Greg and Supreme from Sweden came because it was only a week before the first Las Vegas camp was to take place. And Supreme had made contact with Greg. There's a story there why Supreme had to make contact with Greg after we'd set that up. And in making that contact, he was able to come to the first Hip Hop International in Manhattan. Well, we're sitting there and everything's going fine. I'm talking to Greg. Greg's talking to us. Supreme is sitting there. And Don Campbell walks up. Now, Don and I never had an argument in our life. I wasn't involved with the Lockers breakup or none of that. I was in the Lockers before they actually broke up, before the controversy, even though I knew there were a lot of dissension within there. So I never had a problem with Don. I talked to Don before, never had a problem. But I know him and Greg had a problem. And Don came over and sat down and began to talk. Him and Greg, myself, great conversation. Great conversation. Out of the blue, this young guy starts to walk towards us. And he points directly at Greg and he says, what are you doing here? Why are you here? What is it? And he started a complete ruckus. Don jumped up and Don began to holler at Greg. And Greg began to stand up and they began to go at each other. And this is in the lobby of the hotel that the Hip Hop International was going on in. I am baffled trying to keep them all separated. Don's hollering profanities and he's bringing other people's names up. He's bringing Demita Joe's name up and how people didn't treat him right. And he's bringing up the name of Greg Campbell out Jr., Scooby-Doo, he hollered Scooby-Doo's name of messing with his girlfriend and the whole bit. And it's a huge scene. I'm saying, look, we don't need this. Why is this? And it wasn't going on. And I realized that was Don's stepson, Dennis, that people had told me about, that had been angry at Fred Berry for the term, the rerun dance being out there and a lot of stuff. And I understand a young guy protecting his dad. Now, I never met Dennis. Dennis was not in the scene when I was in the scene in the early 70s. Dennis was a young kid that came about after Don came back in the mid 70s and did some things, but in the later 70s rather. But he wasn't around in the early mid 70s when I was dancing with the Lockers and doing things like that. At that event that night when the awards was given, we weren't brought up on the stage. Dennis had brought Don there because Dennis was contacted and brought along with Tosh. They did a routine on the stage and they now had control of Don. Don was a commodity. It wasn't about educating or bringing the Lockers together. Don was a commodity that was being bought and sold, and Dennis had set that up. So they became Dennis became part of Locker Legends, not Locker Legends, correction. He became part of the Hip Hop International from that point on. But people did not hear that story. They did not get that story. They did not understand that story as it existed. And that story evolved into when Jimmy Scooby-Doo Foster came back and he was first taken to the Hip Hop International. I have never judged at the Hip Hop International. Never. Because of the politics of trying to put Greg and Don back together. So people can say they tried. I tried. I tried several situations and several times to put the organization back together. I'm going to drop this out. You see this? This was after How the West Was Won in Hollywood. Back in 2005, when I tried to put these two back together, I held a meeting at the IHOP in Hollywood afterwards, trying to get all of the OG Lockers back together. So you guys aren't the first ones to try to do it. But you notice there's always a middle person that does not really want the organization to take place. I know I've stepped on some toes today. I don't care. But I know I've told some truth today. And that's not all truth. There's some more facts of the Hip Hop International. Me bringing Scooby-Doo back to the situation, back together. Why there was the signature of the 7 Lockers in the first place to control the name. The threats I received about the name Locker Legends. There's a lot of things in the recent history that people know. A lot of dancers out there know it, but they won't tell it. And that's how locking has got distorted, because the same situation took place from the 1970s. Many stories took place. The story of Tony Basil wanting to manage the ghetto dancers and taking their contract from them with the Steve Allen tour, giving it to only 3 of the Lockers because Steve Allen could afford to pay 3 of them at what they wanted. But it cost the ghetto dancers their position. There's that story. You don't believe me? Want to know where my facts come from? Ask the ghetto dancers. Ask Greg Dandridge, Captain Crunch, the original Captain Crunch. No one told you there was an original Captain Crunch. They was going to allow that lie to continue in history. It wasn't a lie. It was a confusion that they allowed to be a lie. One last thing, and God bless the dead, rest in peace. but the truth eventually must come out. You see, the argument between Greg and Don was basically about Don accusing Greg of using his name. Well, the names were very similar. Greg's name, Campbellock Jr., was taken because he seemed to be he wasn't related, but he seemed to be a junior to Don Campbell, because Don Campbell was the originator of the style of dance of locking. But that wasn't Greg's first nickname. That wasn't Don's first nickname. Don was simply called Don Campbell. His nickname became Campbellock as he titled the nickname. Greg's nickname was first called Campbell Jr. His nickname became Campbellock Jr. when Don Campbell changed his name to Campbellock. So Don did not like the following of the name, especially when him and Greg did not get along over the lockers. And remember, I told you a story. Greg is the one that put the choreography in the locking from Watts Ryder's workshop. Don was the creator of the style of dance, not the choreography and the art of locking in that performance. When I first went to Japan, the poster put up at Tony Gogo's 30th anniversary said Campbellock. That's what it said. It said no junior. I brought that to Greg's attention. He said, "Oh, it's just a misprint. I can't control the misprints." And I said, "Yeah, I understand it. But there were people there that thought he was Campbellock, not Greg Campbellock Jr. And like I said, I love Greg, but I'm going to tell the truth. Later on, when Greg went to Rennie Harris's production in England, we put a video together. That's the video you see on YouTube where Greg talks about creative generation, and he talks about all of those things, because we wanted him to show that video to show that he was not Don Campbell and not representing Don Campbell at the Hip Hop International. Not at the Hip Hop International, but at the event in England. Well, when Greg came back from that tour, he had newspaper clippings and everything. And they made reference to him being the creator of locking and Campbellock. So I got upset at Greg. I told Greg, I says, we need to write a retraction to this. I says, that's not accurate. That's not true. He said, Skeeter, I don't have any control of what they do. I didn't do it. I'm not going to write a retraction. I said, this is going to cause a problem. And we made the video so you wouldn't cause a problem in taking Don's place on the tour. He said, Skeeter, I don't want to have a problem. So me as an investigator, I started looking into things. Greg had a license that said Campbellock Productions. Now, I'd heard a story from Skip about an argument they had in the parking lot over that. I called Greg. I said, Greg, we got to stop this confusion of you and Don Campbell. We have to stop this. He became upset. And that was the division that led to the division of the elite locking camp not continuing to do what we had planned to do, which was the camp of Locker Legends Boot Camp that had been taken to Las Vegas. Now, rest in peace, Greg Pope. I hope you understand that I'm telling the truth, and that when generations don't hear the truth, it causes confusion. I stood up for Don, and then when I was talking to Don, I stood up for Greg, and it causes a problem. So now I'm leaving this historic stories, real historic stories, out there. And I'm telling them exactly like they are. Because there are people out there that's too chicken shit to tell it like it is. They want happily ever after. And we in the Black community has been dealing with a promise of happily ever after for 400 years. It's time we start telling the real story and the true story. Critical dance theory. Peace. Much love to you all. Now maybe I can get back to being just regular OG Skeeter Rabbit. But from now on, expect me to tell you like it is. And if your toes is in the way and the shoe fits, wear it.